Yeah, you too. Hey Queens, emmaldy here, the Relentless Boss. I'm here to empower you. Welcome to my channel. If you haven't already, click the subscribe, click the like. This topic is how to find the love of your life. The number one thing for you to find the love of your life is to find yourself and to love yourself. Who wants to love someone who does not love themselves? And that's not to say that you cannot be loved if you don't love yourself. But ultimately, people who desire to be married, they want to find someone who is whole already. And I'm a strong believer that your significant other has to be whole themselves. You have to be whole yourself. You cannot expect to get into a relationship, a healthy relationship, with someone who doesn't really love themselves, who really is not whole, who really has not put in the work to fall in love, head over heels in love with themselves, and who is actually ready and prepared to love in a really wholesome way and not a toxic way, an unhealthy way. So the first thing you need to do is to discover who you are, find out who you are, and love yourself. It is super, super important that you actually love yourself. You actually begin that journey. You are actually intentional about loving yourself, because your significant other half should also be working on loving themselves. He should also be working on loving himself, because what you don't want is two people coming into a relationship, which oftentimes happens. Two people coming into a relationship and they both have not done the work to actually love themselves and know themselves before they've entered into the relationship, and it just creates a lot of unhealthy and toxic relationships. So loving yourself is key, and I am a strong believer in self-love. So loving yourself, knowing yourself, but I truly believe that the foundation of loving yourself is actually knowing how much God loves you, actually having revelation of God's love for you. And so it is super, super important, especially for those of you who are believers. Some of you may be on this video, on this channel, and you're not a Christian. You don't know the love that God has for you. I highly recommend and encourage you to go to Ephesians, the book of Ephesians in the Bible, from chapter 1. It's verse 1 to verse 14, and it talks about how God loves you, how God chose you before he laid the foundation of the earth, how God has a specific plan and purpose for you. God loves you unconditionally. He loves you unconditionally. And so when we have that basic foundation of how much God loves us, that will then help us to know and love ourselves. When we know how much our Creator, our Maker, loves us, we are then able to love ourselves and begin that journey of self-love, so that we can be whole people when we meet our significant other. And so that's number one. Love yourself. Begin that journey. Be intentional. Invest in yourself. Invest in learning how to love yourself before you are found by your person or by your future husband. And one of the things that you often find as human beings, if you're a human being, which I'm sure you all are watching, we tend to talk to ourselves in a certain way. And a lot of the time that can be negative. So negative self-talk, this is something that you would have to be really intentional about to work on. Sit down with yourself and actually begin the process of thinking about what you are actually thinking about. And oftentimes You can be in a situation where you just allow thoughts to run through your mind without giving it a second thought, without actually questioning, well, why am I thinking like this? Is this the truth or is it a lie? And so negative self-talk is one of those things that really, it does affect your outlook. It affects how you feel about yourself. It affects your self-love. It affects everything you do, because if you are seeing yourself in a negative light, the way you interact with yourself, the way you interact with others is going to be affected. And so really just sitting down with yourself and thinking about what you're thinking about and beginning to process the things that you're saying to yourself and whether or not those things are true, and beginning to replace negative thoughts about yourself with positive thoughts. So for example, it could be you saying to yourself, I'm unattractive. That is a lie, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and we are God's creation. God says that we are his masterpiece. God says that we are the apple of his eye. And if God says those things about us, then there must be value in us. We must be beautiful. And so you have to counteract that negative self-talk of I'm unattractive. You have to counteract it with I am attractive. I am beautiful. And queens, this is not an overnight thing. Think about it. You've been thinking a certain way for a very long time. Strongholds have been built up in your mind over time. And so in order for you to begin this process, you have to take it one step at a time and know that it's not going to be overnight. It's going to be a process, and that's okay. It's a process. The most important thing is that you actually begin the process. You actually start the process and stay consistent. Consistency is key. And you will find that as you go through this process, because I know this for myself, as you go through this process, seeing that you will begin to start acting differently, you will begin to start interacting with yourself in a different way, interacting with others in a different way, so that you can begin to actually see the value in yourself, the value in others, and see your beauty, your qualities, the things that make you unique, the things that make you you. And it is just one of those things when it comes to really just boosting your confidence, your self-esteem, your self-worth, is how you speak to yourself. That's one of the things that you have to be willing to actually do the work. You have to be willing to do the work. It is work. It is work, because this didn't just come about overnight. It was a process for you to get to this point of seeing yourself, for example, as unattractive, or whatever the case may be. It was a process, and so it's going to be a process for you to unlearn those old negative self-talk thoughts. It's going to take time, but start the process and you'll begin to start seeing that your thinking will start changing. The way you speak to yourself will start changing. One of the things that I have done, which I truly believe works, is just declaring and speaking over myself what God says about me, and speaking affirmations every single day. At first, when you begin, it may be like, oh my gosh, what is this? What am I doing? But trust me, consistency is going to help you get that compound effect. You are going to begin to start believing what you are saying to yourself, because you are reinforcing. And queens, what is it that you are tolerating from yourself and from others that may be affecting your view about yourself, your self-esteem, your self-worth? What you allow other people to say to you, to do to you, when you have boundaries, or you put certain boundaries in place and then you allow people to flout those boundaries, that chips away at your self-esteem, it chips away at your self-worth, and it's also an indicator of your level of self-esteem and self-worth, how you actually view yourself. Because if you're placing boundaries in your life for whatever reason, and you allow people to flout those boundaries, you are literally saying to yourself subconsciously that you do not deem yourself as worthy enough for this individual, this person, to follow or to adhere to the boundaries that you put in place. And you're indirectly saying to yourself that you're not worthy, you're not enough, you don't deserve for those boundaries to be respected. And that goes into your subconscious mind. It goes into how you view yourself and also how you interact with yourself and others. So it's super, super important that you do the work to really begin to show up as who you are unapologetically, and ensure that people are adhering to your boundaries. And if they're not, and if it's necessary to, you have a conversation with the individuals. If it's somebody who you are in relationship with, who you want to continue in relationship with, you have a conversation. And when you have that conversation with the person or persons, if they become negative, if they don't respond well to you actually addressing the fact that they flouted your boundaries and they don't want to follow your boundaries, then you may have to reassess that relationship. Queens, we are queens. I just want to reiterate that and just really affirm that to you today. We are queens. And so therefore we must act accordingly. We must act accordingly. We must show people that we know who we are, we love ourselves, and when we place certain boundaries for whatever reason, those boundaries need to be adhered to. That is a requirement of being in the presence of a queen. That is a requirement of being in relationship with you, is that those boundaries are adhered to. And so queens, it's super, super important that when you put boundaries in place, you ensure that they're adhered to, that you don't just let it slide, or if someone breaks a boundary that you have put in place, don't just let it slide. Have a conversation, respectfully, of course. Have a conversation, and dependent on the outcome, you will know what to do going forward. But it's super, super important that you work on how you allow people to treat you, the things that you tolerate. If you've got deal breakers in your life, if there's something that is a deal breaker for you, then don't allow it, because that's going to chip away at your self-esteem. It's going to chip away at your self-worth. So that's another thing that needs work on, if necessary, for those of you who are working on what you tolerate for yourself, in terms of how you treat yourself, and then also in terms of how other people treat you as well. Queens, are you actually prepared to find the love of your life? What do I mean by that? I mean, what are you doing spiritually, health-wise, physically, emotionally, financially? What are you doing with your own life to prepare you to find the love of your life? If you have a desire to be married, I mean, it is a perfectly valid desire. It is a perfectly wholesome desire to want to be married. But what are you actually doing to prepare yourself for marriage? Are you looking after your health? Are you working out? And when I'm talking about working out and eating well, eating healthily, I'm talking about for yourself, not just for you have a desire to marry and so you're just doing these things because of a marriage. No, do it for yourself first. And at the onset of this video was talking about loving yourself, and this is part of some of the ways that you can actually love yourself before you find your significant other. So are you intentional about what you're eating? Are you intentional about being active, movement? Are you intentional about your health? Are you intentional about those things? Are you intentional about your finances? Are you intentional about saving? Are you intentional about getting out of debt? Are you intentional about growing wealth, investing wealth, managing your finances, having a budget? Are you intentional about these things? Because when we want to talk about the desire of finding the love of our lives or being married, we want to talk about being in healthy relationships. And ultimately, some of the things that make a healthy relationship is really how we treat ourselves. Because however you treat yourself, that's how you are going to treat your other half. That's how you're going to treat your significant other. You want to look at your health. You want to look at your finances. You want to look at your spiritual walk with God. You want to look at your love walk with God. You want to look at your prayer life. You want to look at your word life. You want to look at, are you fasting on a regular basis? Are you developing the spiritual disciplines in your life to grow closer to God? Because guess what? Your other half, the significant other half, or your person is not going to be the one to complete you. God is the one to complete you. You have to be intentional. Again, I keep saying this word because it is just super, super important that we are intentional about having that desire to find the love of our lives, or to be found. As queens, we should be actually positioning ourselves to be found by our person. But in the interim, in the meantime, what are you doing to prepare you for the discovery, to prepare you for being found by your person? So your finances, your health, your career, your purpose. Are you in the career that you love? Are you in a job that you love? Are you actually living your purpose, your God-given purpose? Have you started that business? Oftentimes, we will literally say to ourselves, well, I haven't found my significant other. I'm not married yet, so I'm gonna wait until I get married before I do X, Y, and Z. No, why wait? Why wait? Prepare yourself now. Do things now. Live a fulfilling life now before you meet that person that God has for you. I really want to encourage those of you who desire to be married, those of you who desire to find or to be found by your significant other. I really want to encourage you. There is a preparation, there is a process, the interim before you meet that person, to prepare you for meeting that person, so that you can actually be a complete and whole person before you meet that person that God has for you. And it's so important that we actually are intentional in doing the work to get there, because marriage is hard. As I've heard many people say, marriage can be hard. Marriage can be hard. Well, it certainly is hard work. It certainly is, work has to be put in to marriage. And so before you get there, make sure that you're fully prepared and you are a completely whole person before you are found by your person, by your husband, so that you can have a healthy, long-lasting relationship. If any of this resonated with you, if there was anything that you wanted to ask about the topic of this video, let me know in the comments. If you are single and you are looking for love, let me know in the comments, and let's have a conversation about the expectations or the things that people think about when it comes to finding their other half. Thank you guys. I'll see you next time.